Hello everybody and welcome to Summer Scene from St. John's. I'm Karl Wells. Today my guest on the program is a gentleman who spent 44 years and some months, as he told me earlier today, working for the Newfoundland Postal Service. The story of his career is a real Horatio Alger story, really, because he started in the bottom ranks of that organization and worked his way right up to the top to become director of the Newfoundland and Labrador Postal Service in 1961. My guest is Derry Clark. Welcome, Derry.
Thank you.
Derry, what was your first job when you started with the post office?
Well, I went in the Newfoundland Post Office. It was Newfoundland Post and Telegraph in these days, as a clerk in August, the 18th of August, 1934. At that time, we had our own financial setup, and I was in the accounts branch. One of the things I had to do was check the bank money orders. The bank would send up the money orders for each day, and I would have to check off the list.
How old were you then?
I shouldn't tell you, because we have to calculate how old I am, but I was almost 21.
Okay.
I was 20, actually.
What sort of qualifications did one need in those days to get a job with the post office?
Well, it was a real job to get a job in these days, because
I imagine.
I graduated from Prince Wales College in 1932, grade 11 in 1932, and you couldn't get a job for love or money because the Depression was on. I went back to Prince Wales and I did commercial for 2 years. I think I did more hockey and football and basketball than I did bookkeeping and shorthand typewriting, but however, I filled in and I got a job with a tea merchant at $5 a week. And
Was that good money?
Oh, yeah, that was reasonably good money, but the unfortunate part of it, I had to give up the job because he couldn't pay me.
Oh, I see.
Then I got another job with Dick Steele, who ran a crockery store down on Water Street.
Yeah.
Down around where the musical clock is today. That was $7.50. I'd improved a little bit, but in the meantime, I got a call from the post office to come for an interview. I had applied for a job in the customs, but I wasn't successful. And apparently, these applications were passed on to the post office, and had an interview there with the English secretary at the time, and I was successful in getting a job at Clerk III, which paid me, I think, was $700 a year. And that was big money then.
I imagine, yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure was. Yeah.
Now, you started work in St. John's at the old post office on Water Street, I guess.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. We're looking at a picture of it here now, Derry. Perhaps you can describe it for us and tell us where it was located.
Well, that building was built in 1886, and on the where the present post office is on Water Street, that was the location of that building. You'll notice that it doesn't show the telegraph section, and that was put on, attached to that building sometime later. I think it's somewhere around 1910, 1911, that the post office took over the telegraph operation in Newfoundland. And that would be on the left-hand side of that picture.
The pillars that we saw at the entrance of the post office there, they eventually ended up, I think, at Roach's Line, decorating the entrance to Mr. Smallwood's home out there, didn't
That's right, yeah. Mr. Smallwood was very fortunate. I guess someone should have been as smart as Mr. Smallwood and grabbed them instead.
Yeah.
But they adorn his gateway out in Roach's Line.
Looking at that building, it looked like a very old British-type building, like buildings you'd see in London today, I guess. Newfoundland's postal service back then was a part of the British Postal Service, wasn't it? That's
right. I did a paper for my history professor about 2 years ago, and I did some research on the Newfoundland Post Office in the 19th century. And I found that the first post office was opened up in 1805 with Simon Solomon as postmaster. But actually, it wasn't a post office as we know today. It was basically a way office where merchants brought their letters to be placed on ships going across to England. I think that the deal was that the postmaster, Mr. Solomon, charged tuppence to the mailer of the letter. One penny he kept for himself, one he gave to the captain of the ship for each letter. But apparently there was only letters handled, there was no parcels or anything like that. And just a way office, and that continued on till I think it was something like 1840 when the British Post Office accepted the Post Office St. John's as a part of the British postal system. Then of course it became a regular postal system. And by 1950 there were post offices as far south, on the south coast as Galtas and as far north as Twillingate.
Now, back when you started with the post office, post offices were located in all sorts of places, I guess, in private homes and on coastal boats. And
yeah, I guess sometime after 1850 there were some buildings built at the larger post offices, but they were very small buildings.
Yes.
Matter of fact, I think at the time of Confederation in 1949 they were all assessed at $1,000, valued at $1,000 each. Some of them weren't worth that, but some were worth a lot more than the $1,000. Yeah. But I would say that 2/3 of the post offices were located in the homes of postmasters. And that still goes on today, you know, in smaller offices.
Yes, I imagine back then, because of that the service that people got must have been a pretty personalized sort of service. I don't guess they were probably restricted to the 9 to 5 type of office hours that you have today. Were there situations where, for example, somebody went over to Aunt Susie's house after supper to ask if there was any mail for them?
Yeah. Well, that went on for many, many years in my day, and I guess it probably continued on until they became unionized, and then, of course, the whole picture changed. They worked from 9 to 5 or whatever the hours were. But I suspect that in many places, as you say, that because of the sort of a family affair in these smaller offices, that they delivered mail on Sundays or after hours or whenever someone called.
Back in the 30s, Derry, just out of curiosity, how much would it have cost to mail a letter from St. John's to, say, Boston?
I would think that I believe the first class rate was something like 4 cents. The figure 5 sort of sticks out in my mind. And I think we had a 5-cent rate for a long while, and then it eventually crept up. And today I think to mail a letter to Boston, I'm no longer in the post office, but yeah. I think it's 36 cents.
Yeah.
It's a drastic increase.
Did you ever think back then that the rates would have climbed as high as they have today?
Well, we did. When I was district director in the 60s, in conjunction with other district directors at our annual meetings, we sort of figured how much it would cost to break even in the post office. And I would say that was in early 1960s, shortly after I was appointed. And we thought then that we would have to go to 40 cents for a letter. I think at that time it was about 10 cents, 10 or 12, I'm not sure which, but we estimate if to maintain the same amount of, or same volume of mail, we would have to get 40 cents a letter to make it break even. And apparently this is what the Crown Corporation is hoping to do, and with their 80% increase in postage rates, it's quite...
Back in the early days, what sort of things were the people using the Postal Service for? Apart from actual mail, were you selling things at the post office? Were there other types of services that you were providing?
No, other than the regular postal items like money orders and registration, insurance. These are all part and parcel of the post office operation. We didn't sell anything else. I don't think. Well, in some of the post office now, they were located in stores.
Yes.
You know, people had shops, and the postmaster operated the post office in conjunction with his, as we call them, Grottenkampfs.
Grottenkampf, yeah. What sorts of things were people mailing back then? Were people using the mails for anything back then that they aren't using them for today? Or was it basically the same type of
I think it was basically the same, Karl, you know. I think one thing stands out in my mind about the mail service in Newfoundland. you used to read in the Evening Telegram or the Daily News that the number 2 train was coming in with 500 bags of mail. This was pre-Confederation, and this was a big day. But after we went in Confederation, immediately the country was flooded with COD parcels from Eatons and Simpsons. And it wasn't a bit unusual to expect 1,000 or 1,500 bags of parcel mail beside the other classes of mail. And this created a real problem for us because our post office weren't geared for the volume of mail. And as a result, we had to go into a building program, and I guess it was sometime in the 60s, we built something like 165 post offices. You know, the type of building that's out in Topsail and Manuals and Kelgrews these days, that type of building. Built a lot of these. I think there were something like 165.
So this would have been a result, I guess, of us having joined Confederation,
right.
and the Newfoundland Postal Service,
Yeah.
which was the postal service of an independent country,
Yeah.
then becoming the part of a postal
Yeah.
service of...
There wasn't any COD service, say, between Newfoundland and Canada at that time, prior to Confederation, I should say. It was purely local COD, but once we got into Confederation and the people got the Eatons and Simpsons catalogues, then the business started to boom on us.
What was the biggest change in the post office after we joined Confederation and things changed?
Well, it was a drastic change for us to change over from a British system to a Canadian system.
What were
Yeah.
the differences?
Well, the difference, big difference in the accounting. We no longer accounted for money orders, for example, but you know, the accounting actually, the whole accounting system, the accounts prepared by postmasters were different, and of course, we didn't have to audit them. They went on to Ottawa direct, so we didn't have any connection with them. And the regulations were all different from what we had known. And the procedures, we didn't have a railway mail service as such, you know, a separate entity, and we had to set up a railway mail service, a separate entity. It's quite a lot of change. We got into a lot of problems in the first few months of Confederation with not knowing what to do with people. See, as I said earlier, we were post and telegraphs, so we had a certain number of people who were doing post office work and a certain number of people who were doing telegraph work. Beside the operators, there was the telegraph accounting. We knew that the operators would go with the CNT when we got divorced in '49, but there were a number of other people in the accounts section that we didn't know where they were going. We get telegrams from Ottawa saying to supply the names of people to go on payrolls, and we didn't know, so it was utter confusion for a while, but we straightened out. I think too, the other thing that happened after Confederation was the change in the RPO and TPO service. So when I say RPO and TPO, that's railway post office, where postal cars ran the trains.
Right, yeah.
And the TPO, we had a mail officer on the coastal steamers, and he performed all the duties of a postal clerk en route. But when I guess it was in the early 1960s, the Mr. Smallwood's program of building roads paid off for us, because we started highway services all down right around the coast, and we just continued the train service and the steamer services.
In the early days, they were even transporting mail by dog team to places, weren't they?
Oh, yeah. See, back in 1840, when they established the postal service, they had to set up new routes over virgin country, or no trails, and they had to set up courier routes going down through to Gander Bay and out to Twillingate, you know, right, right from St. John's.
Yeah. And, of course, then came aviation. And things really changed.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That was I guess the final push-off for the Newfoundland Post Office. And one of the things I've been a bit proud of, because I was instrumental in setting it up. I got to blow my own horns. So, no, that's the blow. But I was instrumental in setting up the Northern Airmail Service. And we started that in, well, we did a survey in the winter of 1947. We flew around. Eric Blackwood had a small operation called Aero Sales and Service. He and Jim Collins and Jim Collins is still in aviation here, and Joe McGilvery, three of them. We did a survey around the island for landing places, right from Wirram in Bonavista Bay right up through, right around the north until we came down to Parsons Pond on the west coast. And that took in all the area, Beaver Peninsula, Green Bay, North Claim Bay. And we got the thing set up, and we put up the submission to the Commission of Government at that time, and they agreed with the idea that it would be much faster and possibly cheaper to send mail that way. And they awarded us a grant of $17,000, which was really peanuts in today's, today's cost. But at that time, we managed to do it too. And we operated a daily, not a day, a weekly mail service to all the offices and the Newfoundland section, and fortnightly to the Labrador coast, right down as far as Nain. I think the Nain got something like once a month or something like that.
No, we're talking about fixed-wing aircraft.
Right? That's right, yeah.
There was also a helicopter service.
Yeah, well...
Tell us a bit about that.
After Eric Blackwood's operation, they lost the contract in 1950 to Maritime Central Airways.
I've got a picture of you and the pilot and another chap. Tell us about this picture now.
Well, that's following the 1952. Our deputy minister was very hipped on the helicopter service at that time, Mr. Walter Turnbull, and he thought that the ideal place to set up a helicopter service would be in Newfoundland.
Right.
And the area we chose to service on an experimental basis in 1952 was that section from New World Island, Change Islands, Fogo Island, and Gander Bay. And we operated this helicopter service from Lewisport. I think the first trip was made out to Gander Bay, the offices in Gander Bay, Carmenville, and Gander Bay, and Victoria Cove, Ladle Cove, several other places. And it was a success to the extent that we could deliver mail very rapidly and pretty well on schedule. But the unfortunate part was that the helicopter could only carry probably 10 or a dozen bags of mail. And as I said a few minutes ago, we were swamped with COD parcels.
Right.
And, we were into a situation where we probably had 50 to 100 bags of mail to go out in a section, and then the helicopter couldn't cope with it. So after that season, it was dropped. The whole idea was dropped because of the carrying capacity was too small, really, for that.
Derry, having worked for the post office for 44 years, there must be a few funny stories about things that happened during your career that you can relate to us. You remember one in particular?
Oh, I got that. I guess there are a lot of funny stories, but probably the type of ones I wouldn't be able to tell on TV. But when I was writing a few notes today, I was thinking about just after the war, the old post office building there you were looking at a few minutes ago was too small for our operations. We moved up in the Naval Dockyard building, and we moved up the administration section and the parcel post, city and forward parcel post. And we had lots of space up there to do our work, but the trouble was we were pestered with rats getting into the parcels. And Paddy Colas, or Herb as he's properly called, we knew him as Paddy, he was supervisor parcel post. He came up with an idea one day, why not hire some rats, some cats to kill the rats. So we put a couple of cats on the payroll. And then it reminded me...
What was their salary?
I think it was $5 a month that Herb got on behalf of the cats. I think it was in Herb's name. But he wasn't allowed to feed them too well, because if they're fed too well, they wouldn't catch any of the rats.
You were going
to being on the waterfront, you were bound to run into the rat problem.
You were going to the cats. There was another funny story you told me about during the war, when you were distributing propaganda for the war effort. Yeah,
one of the jobs, I was in staff clerk, and I guess you'd know him probably today as chief personnel. And one of the jobs I had to do was to send out propaganda to the, this is pictures of warships and battles and troops and all this, and all the good things that the British Army in the Newfoundland
build up the morale,
yeah.
and so on. Yeah.
So these little booklets, they're probably a bit bigger than this one, and
Yeah.
we sent every week. I had to send out a supply of these to the postmasters to distribute to the people. So one day I got a letter from a postmaster over on the West Coast, and he wanted to know what he would do with the money. And I said, you know, I couldn't figure out what money he was talking about. So I wrote him back and I asked him. He wanted to know where he would charge it in his account. And I wrote him back and asked him what money is he talking about. And he came back and he says, this was money from the sale of the propaganda. He was doing very well for the revenue of the post office.
He was selling the propaganda books,
yeah.
which, of course, he was supposed to be distributing free of charge.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Terry, we're almost out of time. Just let me ask you before we go, how are you enjoying your retirement?
Oh, great, great.
You left the post office when? No.
Well, I reached the old age of 65 in November 1978, and of course I had to retire. And one of the things that I always wanted to do was to get a degree. You see, in 1932, when I came out of high school, it was too late there was no money to go to university. So I decided I'd go to university, and that's what I'm doing now.
Very good. Well, good luck. Thanks for being here. Thank you for watching.
You're welcome.